All right, so today we're going to be take a deep dive into identity and access management,
Okay.
or IAM for short.
Sounds good.
Basically, it's about who gets access to what in an organization's digital world. You know,
Yeah, makes sense.
we've got some research papers and news articles, even some real world stories about what happens when you get this wrong.
Oh, wow.
So by the end of this, you'll be able to spot IAM weaknesses from a mile away.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great goal. What's really interesting about IAM to me is that it's not just about protecting an organization from external threats.
Right.
It's about protecting its very core.
Okay, so let's talk about those threats then.
Mm.
What happens when IAM is not handled properly? The sources paint a pretty grim picture.
Yeah, they do. You're talking about a whole spectrum of risks.
Right.
You've got things like security breaches on one end,
Right.
where hackers can get access to all sorts of sensitive data.
Right.
And then there are operational nightmares like systems crashing, workflows getting disrupted, all because the wrong people have access to things.
The source also mentioned compliance headaches.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Failing to meet those industry standards can lead to some pretty hefty fines.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And legal battles, and not to mention reputational damage.
Reputational damage. How does that tie back to IAM?
Think of it this way. Every time you see a company make headlines for a data breach,
Right.
what happens? Their reputation takes a hit. Customers lose trust. Partners start to get nervous.
Yeah.
And everyone questions their ability to safeguard data.
Yeah, that's true. I remember when a well-known company that suffered a data breach had that massive data breach a while back.
Right.
It was all over the news, and their stock price plummeted.
Exactly. And often it boils down to weaknesses in their IAM practices.
Okay, so we've got external threats, but the source also talks about internal risks.
Uh-huh.
What are we talking about there? Is it just hackers trying to break in from the outside, or is there more to it?
No, not at all. It's about recognizing that even well-intentioned employees can pose a risk. If the IAM isn't robust, think about things like, accidental data leaks or employees that exceed their access privileges.
I see. So it's not just about keeping the bad guys out. It's about managing access from the inside as well.
Precisely.
Can you give me an example from the source of what that might look like?
Sure. One example is what's known as escalation of privileges.
Okay.
So imagine an employee with basic access figures out how to get administrative rights.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly they have the keys to the kingdom.
Yikes. That does sound a little scary.
Yeah.
What other internal risks did the source highlight?
Another common one is inactive accounts.
Okay.
Let's say an intern leaves the company, but their login credentials are still active.
Oh, right.
That dormant account becomes a prime target for attackers.
Wow.
Or think about the lack of separation of duties.
Okay.
This is where a single person has the authority to both make a change and approve it.
Oh, that's not good.
Huge potential for abuse there.
Okay, those are some sobering examples. It makes you realize that IAM is really about managing trust and minimizing risk at every level of an organization. And speaking of risk, one thing that stood out to me in the source was the emphasis on passwords as a major vulnerability.
Oh, sure.
We've all been guilty of using weak or reused passwords at some point.
Absolutely. And the source is very clear on the weak or reused passwords are a huge liability.
Okay.
It's like leaving the front door to your digital life wide open.
So what can organizations and individuals do to address this?
Strong password policies are a must.
Okay.
Enforce complex combinations of characters, regular password updates, things like that. But you can't just tell people to create strong passwords. You have to give them the tools and knowledge to do it effectively.
What kind of tools?
Well, for starters, password managers can be a game changer.
Okay.
They generate and store unique, complex passwords for all your accounts.
Right.
So you don't have to remember them all. And then there's multi-factor authentication, which adds an extra layer of security.
Right.
By requiring you to confirm your identity through a separate channel, like a code sent to your phone.
Makes sense.
Things like that.
Yeah.
Really bolstering that security.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like it's a combination of strong policies and helpful tools and user education.
Right.
It sounds like a multifaceted approach.
Definitely.
But it's not just about organizations.
Right. Yeah.
Individuals need to take responsibility for their own digital security too.
Absolutely. We can't just rely on companies to protect our data. We have to be proactive and take steps to safeguard our own information.
So what can we do? What practical steps can we take as individuals?
We'll start by applying those same principles we just talked about for organizations.
Okay.
Use strong, unique passwords for all your accounts.
Right.
Enable multi-factor authentication wherever possible.
It can be so overwhelming trying to remember all those different passwords, though. Is there anything that can make that easier?
Yeah, that's where password managers come in. They generate and store complex passwords for you, so you only have to remember one master password.
Right.
Simple step can significantly improve your security posture.
What else can we do?
Be wary of phishing scams.
Oh, yeah.
Think before you click on links or open attachments, especially from unknown senders.
Right.
Be mindful of the information you share online.
Yeah.
Less you share publicly, less likely you are to become a target.
Makes sense. It's all about being aware and making smart choices. Before this deep dive, though, I honestly didn't think much about a company's IAM practices before doing business with them.
Right.
I just kind of assumed they had it all figured out.
Yeah, that's a common assumption, but it's not always the case.
Mm.
Companies are constantly being targeted, and their IAM systems are always evolving.
Uh-huh.
So what was secure yesterday might not be secure today.
So how can we, as consumers and individuals, know if a company is taking IAM seriously?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. When you're signing up for a new service or sharing your information with a company, inquire about their security practices.
Okay.
Do they use multi-factor authentication? How do they protect their systems from attacks? What measures do they have in place to safeguard your data?
It's our right to know how our information is being handled.
Yeah.
I never thought about asking those questions before, but now I realize it's crucial. Going back to the source material, it mentions several other risks associated with poor IAM practices, and one that stood out to me was the challenge of managing access for external users.
Yeah.
We're talking about partners, vendors, contractors,
Right.
all these people who need access to some of your systems, but not all.
Right. It's a tricky balance for sure. You want to be able to collaborate and share information effectively, but you also need to protect your sensitive data.
So how do companies strike that balance? What does the source recommend?
It all comes down to carefully defining and managing access privileges. Who needs access to what information and for how long? The source really emphasized the importance of revoking access when it's no longer needed.
Right.
Leaving those doors open, even unintentionally, is a major security risk.
That makes sense. It's like a game of digital chess, isn't it?
Yeah.
You got to be thinking several moves ahead.
Exactly. That's why robust IAM solutions are so critical.
Okay.
They provide the tools and frameworks to manage this complexity effectively.
What kind of tools are we talking about?
Well, think about things like automated provisioning and deprovisioning of accounts.
Okay.
This ensures that people only have access when they need it.
Right.
And then there are single sign-on solutions, which streamline access and reduce the need for multiple passwords.
Okay.
And of course, detailed audit trails are essential for tracking user activity and identifying potential security breaches.
It sounds like these solutions can take a lot of the guesswork out of IAM, which is reassuring. But even with the best technology, there's always the human element to consider. Right.
Oh, absolutely. Technology can only do so much. That's why the source highlighted the importance of ongoing employee training. People need to understand the importance of strong passwords, be aware of phishing scams, and be able to recognize suspicious activity.
Right.
It's about creating a culture of security where everyone feels responsible for protecting sensitive data.
That's a great point. It's not just about having the right technology in place. It's about fostering a security-conscious mindset within the entire organization.
Exactly. It's a shared responsibility.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the technical aspects of IAM to the broader implications for organizations and individuals.
It is a lot to absorb.
It can be overwhelming.
Yeah, but remember, every step you take toward better security is a step in the right direction.
So for our listeners who might be feeling a little overwhelmed, what's one key takeaway they can apply to their own lives after this?
I'd say the most important thing is to be aware.
Okay.
Recognize that IAM is everywhere, and it impacts all of us. Pay attention to the security practices of the companies you interact with. Ask questions. Do your research and make informed decisions about how you protect your own data.
Right.
It's about taking control of your digital security.
Now, the source material also touched on the importance of IAM in specific sectors like healthcare.
Yeah.
I found that particularly interesting.
Makes sense when you think about it. Healthcare organizations handle incredibly sensitive data,
Yeah.
so they face even greater scrutiny and regulations when it comes to IAM.
What kind of regulations are we talking about?
Well, in Europe, there's the General Data Protection Regulation,
Yeah.
or GDPR,
Right.
which sets strict rules for how personal data can be collected, processed, and stored.
Okay.
And in the U.S., you have the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act,
Mhm.
IPA for short,
Right.
which focuses specifically on protecting patient health information.
So the stakes are even higher in those industries.
They are. Noncompliance can lead to some hefty fines,
Yeah.
legal battles, a tarnished reputation. It's not something any organization wants to deal with.
It's clear that strong IAM practices are essential for organizations across all sectors.
Uh-huh.
But it's easy to get caught up in the technical details and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Right.
Why should I, as an individual listener, really care about all this?
At its core, IAM is about trust.
Okay.
When companies prioritize IAM, they're sending a message that they value your data and are committed to protecting it.
Yeah.
It's about building a relationship of trust between organizations and the individuals they serve.
That's good points about peace of mind too, right?
Exactly.
Knowing that your information is safe and secure.
Strong IAM practices contribute to a sense of security and confidence in the digital world.
So before we wrap up this deep dive, I have one final question for you and for our listeners.
Okay.
Knowing what you know now about IAM and its implications, what's one change you would make to your own digital security habits?
I'm already pretty diligent about online security, but this deep dive has inspired me to take a closer look at the privacy policies of the companies I share my data with.
Oh, wow.
I want to make sure they have robust IAM practices in place before entrusting them with my information.
That's a great step.
Mhm.
For me, I think I'm going to double down on multi-factor authentication wherever possible.
Yeah,
It's a small change that can make a big difference.
absolutely. And remember, even small steps toward better security can have a significant impact.
So to all our listeners out there, take this knowledge, use it wisely, and stay safe in the digital world.
Remember, strong IAM benefits everyone.